Chapter 14, Manhattan's King and Queen. They maintained eye contact for a while before Godfrey shrugged. "It's fine," he said, almost walking past them when Siegfried grabbed him. His skin hardened, transforming into green jade, and he slammed Godfrey against the wall. A malicious grin spread across his face as he leaned close. "I'm not done with you, you'll pay for that punch." Godfrey raised an eyebrow, recalling the cafeteria fight, where Isolde had helped him nullify Siegfried's connection to his summon. Siegfried chuckled softly, towering over him with his lean, wolfish physique. His dark blue school jacket stretched tight across his muscles. "Where's your pretty knight? I'd love to see him save your pitiful." "Get off." Godfrey's cold reply made Maldred, standing behind Siegfried with his hands buried in his pockets, chuckle. A vein popped on Siegfried's temple. Godfrey grabbed his arm and wrenched it off, shocking Siegfried. He was about to clench his fist when a sharp sting ran up his wrist where Godfrey held. Then their eyes met again. Siegfried froze. His bravado faltered. Godfrey's gaze wasn't the same as before. It was predatory, sharp, the eyes of someone who had killed and survived battles where death lingered close. Just where had Godfrey been for the past 3 weeks? As he turned to walk away, Maldred lunged, only to be halted by Snow's command. "Let him go. Fights should wait for the competition in a few days." Snow's narrowed eyes followed Godfrey's departing figure. "We'll have the opportunity to teach some people their places." His lips curled faintly. He already sensed the change in Godfrey. Clearly the boy had entered a dungeon, but it didn't matter, the disparity between their summons was too great. And in a few days, once the competition began, Godfrey would learn the harsh truth, that talent and hard work weren't equal. Hard work, adored by the weak, only sharpened the advantage of the strong. "Why did you leave him?" Maldred scoffed. Siegfried shoved him aside, glaring at Godfrey's back. "I'll kill you." The moment Godfrey stepped into the classroom, he spotted Dale sitting on a desk, surrounded by a cluster of boys and girls. Other students kept to themselves, reading, scrolling on their phones, or napping. His eyes passed over them and locked onto the girl he'd been chatting with for the past 3 weeks, Isolde. She leaned against the window frame, earpods in both ears, lost in rhythm as she stared outside. But when Godfrey drew back his chair and sat, as if pulled by an invisible thread, she turned. Without thinking, Godfrey expected her beautiful smile to brighten his day, as it always had in their chats. But instead, Isolde frowned. His chest tightened, his heart pounded once loudly. Then, removing her earpods, she rose gracefully, placed one hand on his desk, and brushed his blonde hair back with her manicured fingers. Her glossy lips curled into a pout. "You got into a fight, didn't you? Your hair's ruffled, hiding those nice blue eyes of yours." When she finished rearranging it, a proud smile lit her porcelain face. "There's the pretty face I haven't seen for 3 weeks." Godfrey chuckled. That smile, Dale wanted nothing more than to rip it off his face. His jaw clenched, his expression darkening. "Dale's not happy, look at his face," some students whispered. "Is that surprising? Isolde's the only second-year invited into the Nexus Club and crowned queen in her first month. Even the 4th years acknowledge her as Manhattan's greatest talent. She's hot property. Dale's not the only one after her. Even the numbered in the Nexus Club, the top upperclassmen, have their eyes on her." At another desk, Cecil's eyes narrowed. The word King Tyr flashed in her mind whenever she looked at Godfrey. Even if it was just a rumor, why had it come from the lips of the woman who assessed summons upon awakening? She had to dig deeper. As the school's news writer, this story was too juicy to ignore. If the rumor was wrong, Godfrey would be ruined. But if it was true, she'd expose the biggest secret Manhattan's staff was hiding. Not that she cared about him, whether he was crushed or not was irrelevant. Just then, Snow strode into the classroom with his lackeys, his expression shifting when he saw Isolde leaning casually on Godfrey's desk. "Manhattan's queen." He clenched his fist. How could she humiliate the entire school by leaving her seat to stand by the desk of a humanoid summoner? Teacher Edwin walked in right after and stood at the lectern. "Apologies, I spilled coffee on my shirt. That's why I'm 20 minutes late." His tone was flat as he dramatically cleared his throat and flipped open his notes. "With the competition around the corner, the one that will decide your points and possibly the next valedictorian, all rests on your summons. Today's topic, innate and adaptive skills." He paused, scanning the room. "I'll focus on adaptive skills, since innate ones are fixed from the moment your summon manifests. So, Godfrey zoned out, as did his partner in crime, Isolde. Later, Godfrey walked into the cafeteria side by side with Isolde, his hands buried in his pockets. She ordered chocolate cake for both of them, along with a few extras, and they carried the tray to a corner table. "You've been to a dungeon, haven't you?" Godfrey asked once they sat. Isolde lifted an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "The moment I saw Snow, you, and Dale, I understood what set you apart from the rest. You faced life-and-death battles. You forged stronger bonds with your summons." Isolde took a small bite of her cake, savoring the sweetness before answering. "You're saying you understand why people like us look down on others like they're insignificant." "The difference was obvious the moment I stepped in," Godfrey replied. "It's like a fully grown dog against a puppy. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, the wyvern isn't your only summon, is it?" "Oh," Isolde stopped eating. "And what makes you think that?" "Wyverns can't cut a summoner's bond with their summon, or banish the mana that strengthens the summoner's body. You'd have to be incredibly strong with such a summon." "I'm an 8.5 summoner," she said simply. Godfrey's pupils shrank. "What, you? Lost your courage?" she teased. Godfrey leaned back, eyes burning with determination. Once he opened the second door. "I'm still coming for the valedictorian." His declaration echoed across the cafeteria, just as a strange silence fell. Turning his head, he saw a silver-haired, handsome boy enter, with a dark-haired Asian student at his side. "Is Godfrey insane? He says that on the very day of this semester Manhattan's king decides to visit the cafeteria." A student whispered in disbelief. Godfrey's eyes met John's, and in an instant, it felt as though he were an ant staring up at an elephant. The sheer pressure the boy gave off by just standing there was overwhelming, an intimidating presence that bent the atmosphere itself. No one dared meet John's gaze directly. He was the kind of person who made people lower their eyes instinctively, as though looking at him too long was an offense. John gave a soft nod at Isolde, his eyes sliding past Godfrey as if he didn't exist, and then walked straight towards Snow with the Asian boy beside him. "Care to talk?" John asked, his tone even but carrying an unshakable weight. For the first time, Godfrey watched the proud Snow rise from his seat without his usual smirk, pride, or nonchalance. His face was serious. "Where?" Snow asked. "I'll show you," John replied, turning on his heel without sparing anyone else a glance. Dale froze for a second, expecting the king would at least acknowledge him, but John didn't even spare him a look. The cafeteria buzzed. Everyone knew what John's presence meant. It wasn't just about the Nexus Club. This was about grooming. Everyone whispered that Snow might be chosen, groomed to become the next Manhattan king once he advanced into junior year. That's someone worthy of a king tier. And yet he isn't even a lord tier. Do you see the difference, Godfrey Daniels? Cecil thought, her eyes darting toward Godfrey. She caught his gaze and he raised an eyebrow at her, puzzled at the look she gave him. "That's Manhattan's king," Godfrey asked Isolde, keeping his voice low. She nodded twice. "He is quite strong, with a summon that gives him an incredible advantage. When he was just a sophomore, he hospitalized 70% of his classmates." "What?" Godfrey's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Forget about him, I've got a problem," Isolde said suddenly, catching his attention. Godfrey blinked. What could possibly be a problem for a 16-year-old Lord-tier summoner? "I've been exercising at the school's field every morning for a week now, and I do not like the way Dale stares at me. It's best if you join me tomorrow morning." "I need protection." Her ridiculous excuse made Godfrey roll his eyes. "And you need to exercise. Summoners with good physiques always have the edge. The way I see it, I'm helping you," she added with a sly smile. Godfrey scoffed. "I thought you weren't staying in the dormitories." "Well, the headmaster couldn't leave his precious student outside the academy grounds for too long, not with news of dungeons and cane fanatics on the rise," Isolde replied smoothly. "Come on, it's a win-win. You can't say no." "I'll be there. What time?" 4 a.m. Godfrey accepted, knowing full well it was just an excuse to have a training partner. Still, it would give him the chance to learn more about Lord-tier summoners, but her words lingered with him. 2 summoners had changed the world forever, not just cities or regions, the entire world. The first was Adam, the very first summoner. His summon could clear a red gate in minutes, what took others weeks or months. Worse, it could split itself into many, clearing multiple dungeons at once. It rode the clouds, crushed mountains with its staff, mimicked other summons, and wielded their innate and adaptive skills. It was a monster beyond monsters. The second was Cain, a man from Patmos. Years after Adam vanished, Cain rose with a twisted desire to become God. When the dungeons first appeared, the world entered the 5 years of great despair. 2 billion lives were lost, cities crumbled, continents bled as wastelands spread due to nuclear warheads. Cain brought the second calamity, Blood March. He slaughtered millions who refused to kneel, building a fanatical army. Cities either bowed and worshipped him, or drowned in their own blood. Like Adam, Cain was unstoppable. Even nuclear strikes couldn't bring down his summon. For 10 long years, he reigned as an untouchable tyrant until finally, the 7 great cities united to defeat him, Manhattan among them. Technically New Manhattan, since the original was destroyed a century ago. The next morning, when the fog still blanketed the campus field, Godfrey found Isolde waiting on a bench. She wore a grey hoodie, grey leggings, and white sneakers. Isolde, he called as he approached. She didn't react. He said her name again, a little louder, still nothing. Finally, walking right in front of her, he noticed the earpods tucked in her ears. Her eyes widened when she saw him, so she removed them. "What were you listening to?" Godfrey asked, crossing his arms. "Shooting Star, don't you know her? She's a famous old-time singer. I got to know about her from my mom." She placed one earpod into his left ear, and at once the melody flowed into him. His eyes narrowed. The voice was captivating, soothing and melancholic at once. While basking in the song, they began jogging together. Godfrey didn't spot Dale, but he already knew the boy wouldn't appear. He wasn't a threat to Isolde. When the song ended, it was as if the softer part of Isolde faded with it. Her expression sharpened. "I want to see how strong you've grown," she said, suddenly picking up her pace. Godfrey gritted his teeth and followed, pushing harder. He gained ground but never closed the gap. Isolde's strides remained steady, her breathing light, while his speed tore at his lungs and made the fog vaporize against his skin. For an hour he pushed himself to the edge, until finally he collapsed onto the grass, panting like a beast that had just outrun death. Isolde stood above him, barely winded. A light sheen of sweat glistened on her forehead, but her breathing was even. In contrast, Godfrey's shirt clung to him, soaked through with sweat. Unfortunately, their first class that day was training, back on the same field. Godfrey's thighs still screamed from earlier. Had he known, he might have gone to the nurse. Isolde, Snow, and Dale led the front while Godfrey trailed behind the rest, his legs trembling so violently he nearly collapsed multiple times. "Wow, just look at him," Siegfried mocked loudly. "You should have stayed home, Godfrey. This is pitiful." Their jeers didn't stop even after everyone else had finished and collapsed onto the grass. Godfrey kept running. "You can make it," Dale shouted mockingly, drawing laughter from the group. But Isolde didn't laugh. She stood silently at the track's edge, her eyes following him. When Godfrey finally completed his laps, collapsing to his knees, she rushed forward with a bottle of water. "Of course, he needs a woman too." "Shut it, Siegfried," the instructor snapped, cutting him off. He turned to the others, his voice cold. "While he trained non-stop in the early hours of the morning, you all slept. Yet he still finished the task that left you sprawled on the ground like you'd achieved something. You're the ones making a mockery of yourselves." Dale's face twisted, heat rushing to his cheeks. He had just been publicly shamed and worse, shamed because of Godfrey. Because of trash. Why hadn't Godfrey said anything? Was his silence deliberate, to make fools out of them all? Fury twisted inside him. With a roar, Dale slammed his fist into the ground, shattering it. His hands sank deep into the earth as dust and soil sprayed outward. In the classroom, as everyone now clad themselves in uniforms, white long-sleeve shirts beneath good-looking dark blue jackets, long ties and black pants, with skirts for the females, the tension in the air was as thick as a rolling storm cloud. "Move," Dale roared from behind, and a great number of students scampered to their seats like rats scattering at the sudden switch of a light. He strode into the classroom and sat heavily on the front desk, arms crossed, jaw clenched, his presence alone commanding silence. Orwen, one of his lackeys, leaned against the wall near the window, feigning ease but his eyes constantly flicking toward his leader. Cecil, on the other hand, sat calmly in her chair, but her sharp gaze betrayed the quiet anticipation bubbling within. Just then Godfrey entered the class, gulping down water from a bottle as Isolde walked at his side. The moment Dale laid eyes on him, a spark of fury surged, literal lightning burst from his fingers, striking the bottle. The electricity coursed into the water, turning it into a conduit and sending sharp currents through Godfrey's body. The shock made him grunt, muscles tightening, pain coursing through every nerve. Had he been a normal human, he would have collapsed into unconsciousness, ending up being sent to the school nurse. Crackling arcs of lightning danced along Dale's fists as he rose from the desk, his thick neck popping as he tilted it left and right. I was insulted because of why. But the words choked in his throat. A sudden presence fell upon him, oppressive and suffocating, like an invisible weight pressing down on every inch of his body. He could barely breathe, let alone move. It was the aura of a Lord Tyr. His trembling eyes shifted, and he saw Isolde, her calm expression distorted into something sharp and furious. Godfrey, meanwhile, tossed the empty bottle neatly into the bin and walked straight to his seat without uttering a word. Isolde's gaze lingered on Dale for only a moment longer before she turned her eyes away. Only then did he feel the crushing weight lift from his body. "You hide behind a woman," Dale spat through clenched teeth, trembling in rage, his eyes burning holes into Godfrey, who sat tapping a finger against his desk in infuriating calm. His mouth should have been damaged, his body twitching from the lightning, but he sits there without even a flicker of pain in his eyes. Has he grown that much in just 1 month? Cecil frowned deeply, her calculating gaze sharpening. Isolde exhaled with a sigh. Dale, her sweet voice rang through the class, beautiful even when edged with anger, but her eyes were merciless. "Sit down." Dale's eyes widened. He clenched his fists so tight the veins in his arms bulged, but despite his pride, his legs carried him back to his seat like a chained dog. He hated it, but he knew it. Isolde was stronger. That was the unfair truth. "The competition is near. Let's see how you'll protect him then," Snow muttered lazily, leaning back with an air of disinterest. But Isolde ignored him entirely. Instead, she brought out her earpods, rose from her chair, and gently slid one into Godfrey's ear. She could see the storm raging in his eyes, barely restrained fury, tempered only by sheer willpower. "The competition is just a few days away. Let the leash around your anger loose on that day." Her whisper was soft. Godfrey glanced at her from the corner of his eye. In the department where the staff lounged and sipped their drinks, conversation about the upcoming competition ran lively. "The sophomores this year," the school nurse said with enthusiasm, "have talents we haven't seen in a long while." "That's true," someone nodded. "Edwin, you're in charge of that class. Who do you think will win this month?" All eyes turned toward Edwin, who merely shrugged. "Isolde, Snow, and Dale. Those 3 are definitely above the others. Isolde will undoubtedly come first, Snow second, and Dale third. Cecil is strong, but she can't really match Dale. There might be a dark horse in that class," the combat instructor said, leaning back with a knowing look. "Like you said, the sophomores are full of talent. Nothing is set in stone until the day itself." Edwin raised a brow, puzzled. "And who's this dark horse?" The instructor only took a sip of his coffee. "You'll see." A few days later, the day of the competition arrived. A grand white arena stood proudly at the center of the campus, large enough to hold the roar of a few hundred. The stands were filled with students, freshmen, sophomores, and even upperclassmen who had come to watch the rising talents. The freshman competition was still months away, many of them still adjusting to their summons, but the sophomore matches always carried weight. Rivalries, pride, and the eyes of the academy hung heavy on the arena. The referee, standing tall before the vast platform, hollered with a thunderous voice. First contenders, Godfrey Daniels and Maldred Brown. Godfrey stepped out, eyes narrowing as the sun bore down on him and hundreds of gazes fell upon his back. The pressure should have been immense, but his thoughts circled only around one fact. He was chosen first, and his opponent was none other than one of Snow's lackeys. It was clear they wanted to weed out the weak early. And who else to put on the chopping block but the boy who awakened late, the one whispered to be the weakest sophomore, the one who awakened with freshmen. Among the freshmen, there wasn't a shred of respect in their eyes. Some sighed, already disappointed. Others leaned forward, eager to see him humiliated. After all, Godfrey had been foolish enough to clash with the top boys of the class. To them, he was a moth flying into fire. But the truth was simple. The top boys had demanded respect, and Godfrey had refused to bow. For that alone, he became their enemy. Maldred ascended the platform from the south, while Godfrey approached from the north. They stood 30 meters apart, and yet the platform still had space for giants to battle. "We finally meet, and your shield is way over there," Maldred sneered, pointing at Isolde seated in the audience. She was easy to spot, for no one dared sit within 5 seats of her in any direction. Her isolation was a throne of its own. "I remember the punch you gave me when I first came here," Godfrey said, sliding his hands from his pockets. "And I remember the spikes, but today I'll show you mercy." "You'll show me mercy, me?" Maldred's cocky grin twisted into fury as a portal bloomed beside him. From it stepped a 5-foot-tall beast. Its 3 pairs of steel-tipped tusks gleamed under the sun, its mane of quills bristling like spears, its burning red eyes wild and savage. The referee's voice boomed. Iron-tusked porcupine boar elite tier 4.2. Bring out your knight, Maldred taunted. Behind Godfrey, a golden diagram of intricate symbols appeared, glowing so bright it seemed to rival the sun. From it came the sound of heavy metallic clinks, like chains falling onto stone. The arena became silent as an armored figure stepped forth. Maldred's pupils shrank, his grin faltering, as the shadow of Mountain loomed across the arena floor. Was that always how it looked? The Mountain everyone saw on the day of awakening just a month ago was nothing compared to the hunk of living steel standing before them now. He had grown from 7 feet tall to a towering 7.5. A fan-shaped metal crest, bearing the motif of a blazing golden sun, had sprouted from the crown of his great helm. 3 thick spikes, each as wide as 2 fingers pressed together, jutted from his massive pauldrons, one stabbing upward like a spear, another thrust forward as if to impale any foe foolish enough to be shoulder-checked, and the last stabbing backward in ruthless defiance. Both pauldrons had transformed into lethal weapons in their own right. His heavy cloak billowed as he brandished his great oval shield and longsword. The sight of him was no longer that of a mere knight summon. He looked every inch the image of a royal knight captain, radiating both the majesty and the suffocating terror of his order. What in the world? That's not how it looked a month ago. Cecil's eyes narrowed, disbelief flashing across her face. Knight Captain of the Golden Order, Elite Tier 4, the referee bellowed. He knew the name because the students were required to provide full summon details to the school's staff. It was an odd name, but nobody cared about that now. All eyes widened at the revelation of Mountain's tier. A month ago, he had been a mere low Tier 3 summon. Now he stood as a 4 elite tier. That was shocking enough, but what unsettled them most was how. This was a humanoid summon, infamous for its painfully slow growth rate. Yet somehow, Mountain had surpassed even beast summons, growing at an impossible pace. Feeding him dungeon cores was the obvious theory, but even that explanation didn't fit. A low-tier summon usually required months to digest that amount of core. This one had done it in a single month. Maldred gritted his teeth, fury bubbling. His iron-tusked porcupine boar bristled, then fired quills the size of arrows at Mountain. The deadly projectiles clattered harmlessly against the Knight Captain's steel hide, bouncing off with dull, mocking chimes of metal on metal. Mountain did not slow. His strides grew longer, faster, a juggernaut accelerating toward the beast. Panic flared in Maldred's eyes as his summon unleashed another hailstorm of iron-infused quills. These quills were strong enough to punch through vehicles with ease, yet Mountain raised his shield, and the damage reflected. Slashes and punctures tore open on the boar's hide, blood spattering as if the beast had impaled itself. With a squeal of rage, it lowered its reinforced tusks and charged, no longer in control of its fury. Golden lightning suddenly crackled across Mountain's armor, coursing through his body like divine fire. Gasps erupted from the stands. "That's lightning infusion," someone shouted. It was an adaptive skill, learned to counterbalance the burden of his colossal mass. No one expected a tank to move with the speed of a motorcycle, and as predicted, the porcupine boar had no chance to react when Mountain vanished from its tusk's path and reappeared at its flank. Before the beast could whip its head around, Mountain slammed his colossal shield into its skull. The impact met the tusk at the same instant the beast tried to snap forward. A resounding crack split the air. One of the boar's thickest tusks snapped clean, while the monster itself was hurled backward like a broken doll. It smashed into the stone platform with a deafening crash, fractures spiderwebbing across the stage as dust billowed upward. But Maldred wasn't finished. With a snarl, he darted past Mountain, his eyes locked on Godfrey, who stood calmly at the edge of the platform, arms crossed. Godfrey's passive, unbothered expression ignited Maldred's fury all the more. Iron spikes erupted from Maldred's palms, each 6 inches long and razor-sharp. He raised his arm to strike, but froze. An oppressive killing intent bore down on him from behind, suffocating in its weight. The very air split as something cleaved through it, the sound shrill and deadly, and every hair on Maldred's body rose in terror. Instinct saved him as he ducked. Mountain's longsword came down like a thunderbolt, plunging deep into the stone floor, splitting it as though it were no stronger than parchment. The blade sank halfway into the platform, the impact rattling teeth across the arena. How can something this big move that fast? Maldred's pupils shrank, horror painting his face. He knew of lighting infusion, but only someone affiliated with the element could learn that skill. Mountain was already upon him, his shield raised high. If that weapon came down, it would not just break bones, it would kill him. He rolled desperately forward, spikes bursting from his palm as he cursed Godfrey with every breath. But before he could strike, a gauntleted backhand met his face. The blow was casual, almost lazy, yet the force sent Maldred sailing 5 meters through the air. He crashed to the stone like a ragdoll, his skull cracking audibly even as blood trailed from his lips. Mountain grunted. That had been a gentle slap, but even holding back, he had nearly caved Maldred's head in. Pulling his longsword free from the stone, he began a slow, deliberate march toward Godfrey. The audience could only stare, petrified. Maldred didn't even stand a chance. One of the freshmen, who shared a dorm room with Maldred and often bragged about it, stammered in disbelief. His spikes could pierce walls, and he was even friends with the famous Snow, but he was demolished. And Godfrey, everyone can see it, he's being merciful. Mercy, a word reserved only for the strongest, and today Godfrey had claimed it for himself. Godfrey wins, the referee declared. He barely finished before Maldred was hauled away to the school nurse. Godfrey stepped down from the platform, but his path was blocked at the north door. Siegfried awaited him, towering, his eyes alight with malice. "Don't fail, meet me on that platform and know this," his glare sharpened. "Once I'm done with that night of yours, I will bash your head in." Godfrey raised a single eyebrow, but said nothing. His silence was heavier than any insult. He walked past, leaving Siegfried to ascend the platform. His opponent, a sophomore, summoned a wolf. "Grey direwolf low tier 3.1, the referee announced. A green magic circle flared behind Siegfried, and from it emerged a 6-foot wolf, its body carved of gleaming jade, its eyes milky white with silent menace. "Jade-eyed wolf elite tier 4.6, the referee cried. In the same instant, jade enveloped Siegfried's body. His hands swelled, twisting into monstrous wolfish paws with elongated fingers and claws that could envelop a man's head with ease. His tongue turned to gleaming jade as he licked his lips. "This is going to be fun," he drawled, crouching low, then his grin widened, but quick. He launched forward, leaping high into the air before slamming his massive paw down on the direwolf's head. The creature had no chance to dodge. It flattened under the crushing blow, blood bursting from its maw as fangs shattered. Its summoner screamed, hurling himself at Siegfried in desperation. But Siegfried's clawed hand wrapped effortlessly around his throat, lifting him like a child's toy. The boy dangled midair, his hands clawing desperately at Siegfried's jade skin, leaving no mark. Standing 191 centimeters tall, Siegfried towered over the trembling sophomore, who barely reached 172. With one arm he strangled the boy, eyes never leaving Godfrey, who sat calmly beside Isolde. A malicious grin stretched across Siegfried's face, his gaze taunting, as if saying, "You'll be here soon." Siegfried wins, the referee barked, urgency in his tone, as if to remind Siegfried he was seconds from killing a classmate. Clicking his tongue, Siegfried tossed the boy to the ground like a discarded rag, whistling cheerfully as the student gasped and clawed at the air, his face an ugly shade of red. Beside Godfrey, Isolde spoke softly, "Will you be okay facing him?" Godfrey's face didn't change. His eyes stayed steady, fixed on Siegfried's wolf, his jaw tightened. "I'll do just fine. I've had my eyes on that wolf for a long time." After several other fights, Isolde finally ascended the platform. Her opponent was a blue-haired girl who had already demolished her previous challengers with the overwhelming firepower of her summon. "I know you're strong, but I won't submit to a queen who is controlled by a humanoid summoner," the girl spat. "For that, I don't recognize you as Manhattan's queen." Lucy's scowl deepened as she raised her hand. A dark blue summoning diagram blossomed from her palm, spinning and widening. From its depths emerged a unicorn. Its spiraled horn was formed entirely of blue crystal, sharp and jagged with a natural curve, glinting like a weapon forged from frozen lightning. The creature's very presence exuded majesty and danger. "Gemstone Unicorn, Elite Tier 4.4, the referee announced. Lucy swung herself onto its back with practiced ease. A spear of gleaming blue gemstone formed in her hand, while 12 crystalline spearheads hovered above her and her unicorn like an arsenal of floating death. The unicorn reared up on its hind legs, neighing like a warhorse at the head of an army. The gemstone shards launched forward, whistling through the air. Yet Isolde merely waved her hand, and the deadly shards, each capable of piercing an armored vehicle, shattered to harmless dust before they could reach her. Snarling, Lucy hurled her gemstone spear, as her summon charged across the platform like a thunderbolt. Isolde clenched her fist and struck. The spear, which carried enough force to tear down a fortress wall, shattered against her knuckles. But the shards did not fall. Instead, they whirled back into motion, cutting through the air faster than before. One shard grazed her face and struck her eye, forcing her head back. "What kind of queen are you now?" Lucy sneered, only for her expression to falter. Isolde lowered her head again. Her eye was perfectly intact. Her golden-orange eyes gleamed, glowing faintly, and in the next heartbeat an oppressive weight descended on the platform. Lucy's body froze. Her unicorn collapsed beneath her, its proud legs buckling as it was crushed flat against the stage. Foam frothed from its mouth like a dying beast. Lucy slumped in the saddle, then fainted outright. "That's Dominion." Snow narrowed his eyes. His voice carried a rare gravity. "It's a summoner's skill, like echo or exchange. It projects the aura of a great summon directly through the summoner's eyes. In some cases, it can even kill outright, depending on the summon's power and the target's will." He recited the same words a Lord Tyr told him. From the shadowed window of a building overlooking the arena, Yuan, the Asian upperclassman known as the Knight to Manhattan's King, clapped softly. "She's a monster. She might even be as strong as you," he remarked, turning to John, who stood silently at his side. "She's stronger," John said flatly. "She has 2 summons." In the secluded staff section of the arena, Teacher Edwin glanced at the combat instructor, who stood with arms crossed. "Dale has done nothing but fry his opponents, Snow has dismantled his without effort, and Isolde doesn't even need her summon. Who is this dark horse of yours? No one else here comes close." Even as the tournament carried on and other students fought, whispers of Isolde's dominance lingered in the crowd. Only when fighters like Cecil and Orwin entered did the audience briefly shift focus, yet in the end, even their efforts were measured against Isolde's display. Snow's opponents were left flailing helplessly, striking at illusions until he knocked them unconscious with casual slaps. Dale electrocuted his challengers without mercy, sending them all to the nurse's ward. Godfrey, too, fought twice, and now he was called again for his deciding match. This was the battle that would determine whether he advanced to the quarterfinals or lost his chance. The prize for the top 3 was immense: high-level dungeon cores, treasures that could vastly accelerate a summon's growth. As Godfrey stepped onto the platform, silence swept across the arena. His opponent was Siegfried. Gasps and whispers rose. Everyone remembered the story. On Godfrey's very first day in Manhattan, he had crossed Siegfried, and later on Siegfried had bashed his head into a wall. That beating had left Godfrey absent for a full month, said to be recuperating from both the injuries and the trauma. "You made it, good." Siegfried's grin was cruel. His jade-eyed wolf padded beside him, its eyes glowing with white malice. "Summon that 4-knight of yours. Let's see whose summon is superior, your 4-knight or my 4.6 jade-eyed wolf." He cracked his neck, a predatory gleam sparking in his eyes. "I would have loved to be the one to bash him," Dale muttered with a relaxed smile from the stands. "But I guess no one can do the job better than Siegfried." "Siegfried's summon is built for both offense and defense," Cecil said. "With that balance, it can even challenge a 5 at its peak. Godfrey isn't walking out of this one." Her eyes flicked toward Isolde, who sat silently, gaze locked on the 2 figures facing each other on the platform. At Godfrey's call, Mountain materialized. The knight loomed tall. "Use blackout state." At once, Mountain's golden armor darkened, turning a sinister crimson as though drenched in fresh blood. His longsword steel shifted into obsidian, absorbing the light. The referee's eyes bulged. "Knight Captain of the Golden Order, Elite Tier 5-0. "What?" Siegfried's composure shattered. Dale's smile contorted into disbelief, while Snow's expression darkened. A jump from 4 to 5. It was absurd. If this was an innate skill, then the knight was far more than what any of them had ever realized. "Isn't that the boy we saw sitting with Isolde at the cafeteria?" Yuan asked, squinting. John only gave a faint nod. Mountain hefted his obsidian longsword and began to march forward. The jade-eyed wolf roared, slamming its forelimbs into the platform. From the stone erupted a forest of jade spikes, racing toward Mountain. But golden lightning arced across his armor, lightning infusion, and he was gone, vanishing from the danger zone. "You're dead," Siegfried howled. He descended from above, claws aimed at Mountain's helmet. Mountain did not dodge. His entire armor shimmered, transmuting into blood jade. Siegfried's claws scraped harmlessly across its surface, sparking like metal on stone. The knight's shield swung upward with brutal force, striking Siegfried squarely and launching him back several meters. Before the boy could recover, Mountain unleashed a surge of mana through his obsidian blade. "That's mana slash," a student shouted as a beam of raw energy erupted from the sword. The jade-eyed wolf leapt aside, but the beam still carved a deep gouge into the platform, stone exploding in every direction. Snarling, Siegfried slammed his palm into the ground. 4 jade walls shot upward, boxing Mountain inside. His wolf struck the floor with its forelimbs, and within the prison, jagged spikes erupted upward. "Jade prison," Siegfried's grin widened, manic triumph flashing in his eyes. But his expression froze as the wolf convulsed, holes splitting open across its body. It howled in agony. The jade walls collapsed, revealing Mountain crouched on his great shield. The spikes had struck him, but the damage had reflected back onto Siegfried's summon. Furious, the jade-eyed wolf turned its rage on Godfrey, sprinting at him. It spat a jade spike. But in the instant before impact, Godfrey swapped positions with Mountain. The knight raised his shield, reflecting the spike's force again. He followed with a clean, merciless slash, tearing a massive gash across the wolf's crystalline hide. Meanwhile, Siegfried charged Godfrey himself, rage distorting his features. But Godfrey's calm eyes turned on him, and once again, they switched places. This time, Siegfried found himself staring directly at Mountain's charging form. A wall of steel and blood jade thundered toward him like an unstoppable tank. Blood-red spikes erupted from the ground on either side, sealing off any path of escape. Siegfried's blood ran cold. Mountain was using his summon's innate skill better than he could himself. How is this possible?" His voice cracked with panic. As if that wasn't enough, the spikes rose even higher, curving inward until they formed what looked like the ribcage of a massive beast. The crimson jade rib prison gleamed under the sun like the bones of some ancient monster. Mountain, leaving behind heavy echoes with each step, charged towards Siegfried. At that very moment, Siegfried suddenly stretched out his hand. Beside Godfrey, a black summoning diagram flared to life. From it emerged a giant dog, a 2.5 low-tier summon. The instant it appeared, Siegfried activated exchange, swapping places with the beast. In a blink, he was standing right beside Godfrey, his lips curling into a prideful grin as his jade claws arched toward Godfrey's head. At the same time, the jade-eyed wolf, which had already been on the battlefield, lunged forward, its deadly fangs snapping for Godfrey's neck. Godfrey couldn't even form a coherent thought. Everything happened in less than a heartbeat, too sudden for him to consciously react, but instinctively he called upon Echo. Mountain's armor materialized around him, and lightning crackled across his body. This lightning wasn't meant to attack. Its only purpose was to amplify his speed, though that didn't mean it wouldn't hurt when he landed a blow. With every ounce of strength he had, Godfrey forced his body forward, just enough to evade the wolf's snapping jaws. His gauntleted fist, wrapped in golden lightning, shot upward in a devastating uppercut. The punch connected squarely. Siegfried's eyes widened as blood and spit burst from his mouth. He collapsed instantly, knocked out in a single blow, his jade skin receding. Furious and more aggressive than ever, his summon roared. The jade-eyed wolf burst forth with renewed speed, only to slam headlong into the metal surface of a shield Godfrey summoned. Its claws tore through the shield with ease. This construct wasn't as durable as Mountain's true defenses, but the brief delay gave Godfrey enough time to retaliate. He thrust forward with an Echo longsword, but the blade bounced harmlessly off the wolf's jade skin. Its strength was around 4.6, nearly twice Godfrey's own 2.5, and its defenses could withstand even some 5-tier attacks. Growling, the wolf tried to crush him under its sheer weight. Godfrey discarded the shield, rolled aside, and vanished in a flash of light. What appeared in his place was an 8-foot-tall knight clad in crimson armor, its presence oppressive and commanding. With a single swing of its massive sword, the knight carved a gash straight across the wolf's eye. Before the beast could recover, the knight slammed into it with his shield, sending it flying backwards and lying limp. Godfrey tugged his helmet off, his gaze landing on the giant dog lying on the ground. It whimpered in agony, its bones broken and body pierced by spikes that would kill it the moment Mountain willed it. Siegfried's secret that he possessed 2 summons would have cost Godfrey this battle. If he hadn't reacted in time, he would have been the one bleeding on the floor, his face torn open by the wolf's fangs, maybe even half dead. There had been no mercy in Siegfried's eyes. He was prepared to kill. Godfrey's face darkened. He beat Siegfried. Owen's pupils dilated, his expression twisting with disbelief. Beside him, Cecil narrowed her eyes. The innate skill and growth rate of that knight, she murmured. It might place him in the same growth potential as the dragon species. What nonsense, Dale snapped, scowling. Siegfried was just careless. No, Cecil countered, her voice a bit sharp. His summon has the ability to copy the innate skills of other summons, and not just copy, but make them stronger. That knight isn't some mindless metal golem. It has intelligence. Her gaze locked on Mountain. Gasps and whispers erupted across the arena. A humanoid summon, especially one that intelligent, was unheard of. Godfrey was the only student in all of Manhattan's summoners high to possess one. Owen crossed his leg and leaned back casually. So, he's entered the quarterfinals then. Cecil rose as the referee declared Godfrey the winner and announced the matches for the following day. Apparently, she and Godfrey would face each other first. Her lips curled into a sharp smile. His summon may have revealed all its cards. It can rise to 5, but so what? My summon is 5.8, has mastered the ancient art of Muay Thai, and above all, she glanced at Dale and Orwin, who already knew what she meant. It has no innate skill. As Godfrey left the platform, Orwin chuckled. I almost feel bad for him. He doesn't realize his fate is already sealed. He humiliated me, Cecil, Dale said darkly. Make sure he understands why that won't happen again. With the last match concluded, the students began to leave, their conversations buzzing about what they had just witnessed. Most of the talk centered on Godfrey and his incredible night. And make sure he stays away from Isolde, Dale added. He's dragging down her prestige. Godfrey lay on his bed, one hand behind his head, staring at the ceiling. After the match, he had gone to the cafeteria with Isolde, then returned to the dormitory as sunset neared. Cecil's summon, a 5.8 high tier, was another matter entirely. Fearsomely intelligent, it had even mastered ancient martial arts from a bygone nation, destroyed during several Red Gate dungeon breaks. For the first time since his return, Godfrey felt he had hit a wall. Mountain stood no chance against such a monster, especially since it lacked an innate skill. The information weighed heavily on him, filling him with a creeping sense of hopelessness. Closing his eyes, he retreated into his soul's space. Before him loomed the great door, its surface almost entirely turned to wood now. Only the divider at the center, the link between the two massive doors, remained petrified. He could feel it in his core. One more push, even the smallest increase in Mountain's strength, and the door would unlock completely. His eyes snapped open. He sat up abruptly, went to his desk, and flipped open his laptop. Typing green dungeons in Manhattan, he scrolled through the search results. Manhattan had far fewer green dungeons than places like Amazon City. Many were already claimed by guilds or cleared entirely. His heart sank with every passing line. Grinding his teeth, he kept scrolling, his expression growing darker. Then a video title caught his attention. He clicked it. On screen, a girl tearfully recorded the entrance of an abandoned subway station, its construction halted more than a decade ago. Her words were broken, but Godfrey understood. She was talking about her father and younger sister. A family of ordinary people. His eyes softened. People like them were often ignored. The video was a month old. It still hadn't gone viral. Some comments dismissed it as a hoax. Others blamed the family for walking into obvious danger. Only a handful acknowledged its weight. Closing his laptop with a snap, Godfrey rose, pulled on a black hooded jacket, jeans, and sneakers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he boarded a taxi and left the school grounds. He had only one goal in mind: clear this dungeon and unlock the second door. The bright beams of the taxi cut through the night, illuminating an abandoned stretch of land. At its center stood the subway entrance, dome-shaped and forlorn. The cracked cement floor around it was overrun with grass and weeds, reclaiming the forgotten place. Buildings stood to the left and right, but they were distant, nearly a kilometer away, their faint lights flickering like indifferent stars. Are you sure it's all right for a kid to be out here this late? The driver asked, his voice hesitant. He was a man with quite the stomach, leaning back to look at Godfrey as the boy stepped out. Godfrey turned briefly, his eyes glowing faintly for a second before returning to normal. I'll be fine. He descended the dusty staircase, leading down into the subway. Rats scuttled away at the sound of his footsteps, vanishing into cracks and holes. His brows furrowed, hard lines appearing on his forehead as his thoughts grew heavy. Had this dungeon already been cleared? The scenery remained unchanged, abandoned, dark, and eerily silent, with nothing but cobwebs for company. But then he reached the last stair, and something didn't fit. The beam of his torch caught a gathering at the far end of the station. Cheers, guttural and crude, echoed across the chamber. A group of 15 creatures stood there, humanoid in shape, clad in mismatched steel armor, cuirasses, vambraces, greaves, and boots. The armor covered only parts of their bodies, leaving exposed their strange features, wide, lupin ears jutting high above their heads like grotesque antennae. Their skin was a deep crimson. Hobgoblins. The infamous evolution of goblins. Unlike their stunted kin, usually no taller than 10-year-old children, these were as tall as grown men, tall as Godfrey himself at 183 cm. Each one carried a flaming torch and leather bags slung across their bodies, their cheers filled with excitement over their spoils. But the moment the bright white light of Godfrey's torch fell upon them, silence fell like a blade. Godfrey's gaze locked on the leader, a battle-hardened hobgoblin chief. A golden ring necklace hung from his neck, instantly familiar. It was the same necklace worn by the girl from the video. A heavy sadness filled Godfrey's chest. She hadn't just filmed the place. She had gone inside and never returned. The chief, scarred and broad, with dark hair spilling freely down his back, fixed his hungry eyes on Godfrey. His mouth twisted in savage delight as he pointed his sword forward, shouting, "Javisky Kyalejev." Godfrey interpreted the meaning instinctively, "Hold that meat." The hobgoblins charged, 15 strong, shields and sabers in hand. Their boots pounded against the stone floor. Godfrey clenched his fist. In an instant his hand became gauntleted, arcs of lightning dancing across the steel gauntlet. He remembered his boxing lessons, the hours spent on bags and drills long before he awakened as a summoner. Instinct guided him now. The first hobgoblin swung diagonally, its blade whistling through the air. Godfrey ducked low, leaning right. The saber missed by inches. He launched his right arm forward, his gauntleted fist crackling with golden lightning. It struck the hobgoblin's cheek with a thunderous impact, snapping its lower jaw and sending teeth scattering. Godfrey spun, his left fist surging with even greater power. He slammed it into the shield of the second hobgoblin. The golden lightning shredded through the wooden barrier like paper, obliterating it before tearing into the creature's chest. The cuirass caved in with a sickening crunch, ribs snapping as the hobgoblin was hurled backward, vomiting blood. Two more pressed in. Godfrey raised his forearms, gauntlets sparking as they deflected twin saber strikes. His blue eyes darkened as they lifted, locking onto the chief hobgoblin. The brute only chuckled, arrogantly inspecting his blade, waiting for his warriors to deliver the kill. Suddenly, Godfrey retreated, his movements sharp and precise, weaving through their attacks with inhuman precision. The chief's expression faltered. His voice thundered through the station, "Rakush Jelkakiba." Before the warriors could overwhelm him, a golden summoning diagram erupted behind the chief. From its brilliance stepped forth a towering figure, Mountain. The hobgoblin chief spun around in shock, but it was already too late. A wrathful slap sent its head flying, severed clean from its shoulders. The head smashed into the station wall with a crack, scattering dust and debris as the body collapsed in a pool of blood. Empowering himself with lightning infusion, Mountain burst forward, his longsword blazing with golden arcs. He swung it in a wide arc, releasing an energy wave that carved through 3 hobgoblins in one strike. Another warrior lunged. Godfrey pivoted, punching it into the wall. Its eyes rolled white as it slid down unconscious. A second hobgoblin leapt from behind, blade descending for his back, but Godfrey shifted, Mountain's armor covering him entirely. The sword struck uselessly against the thick pauldron, and the attacker impaled itself on the jagged spike protruding from it. Blood streamed down his cloak as the corpse fell away. With a grunt, Godfrey summoned his longsword mid-motion, intercepting another strike. Steel clashed, sparks flying, before his blade sheared clean through the hobgoblin's sword and buried halfway into its neck. Gurgling, it collapsed as he shoved it aside. When he looked up, the battle was already finished. Hobgoblins littered the floor, their vile green blood soaking into the cracked cement. At the center of it all stood Mountain, golden armor gleaming, surrounded by carnage. Godfrey exhaled. "You know, for the first time, I feel like going back is the way forward." He turned toward the staircase with narrowed eyes. It was no longer made of cement. Instead, a crude, uneven staircase carved into raw stone spiraled upward. He climbed quickly, Mountain following with heavy, metallic steps. At the top, they were met with an alien sky, a vast purple moon glowing high above, the heavens littered with red stars that bled against the dark. They stood in a canyon. Jagged rock walls rose on both sides, the terrain dry and desolate. Godfrey's armored feet rang with sharp echoes on the stone path, while Mountain's heavier strides reverberated like hammer against an anvil. Together, small and large in matching armor, they walked onward. "What a strange sky, right, Mountain?" Godfrey rested his sword on his pauldron, glancing up at the endless purple expanse. Mountain gave only a grunt in reply, but suddenly stopped. His head snapped to the cliffs above. Godfrey followed his gaze. Both ridges of the canyon were crawling with red-skinned figures, hobgoblins, dozens of them, bristling with weapons. They had walked into a military camp. Stones rained down first, hurled by dozens of strong arms. Spears followed, then arrows whistling from above. Mountain raised his shield, covering Godfrey as rocks shattered against it, spears splintered, and arrows bounced harmlessly off the reinforced steel. Cashew Eves, a voice bellowed. It came from a towering figure, a blue-skinned orc nearly 7 feet tall, tusks jutting downward like curved ivory blades. His tribal markings glowed faintly under the starlight, his spiky dark red hair standing wild. His body was strangely monstrous, 3 thick fingers on each hand, and only 2 massive toes planted firmly on the stone on each foot. It also had a dungeon core chained to its chest. His bulging eyes trembled with confusion as he watched his warriors fall. Some collapsed with their chests caved in, as though struck by invisible stones from above. Others dropped with holes clean through their bodies, pierced by unseen spears and arrows. The canyon echoed with the sickening cracks of bones and skulls shattering. Picking up a huge bone club, the blue-skinned goblin general leaped from the top of the canyon, slamming heavily on Mountain's shield, causing the knight captain to fall on its knees, the rocky earth caving inward due to the power of the impact. Lu-Rakashi na, the goblin general pointed the club at Mountain with a furious scowl before dividing into 2, and then the 2 split once more. 4 goblin generals, all of them powerful enough to be a high tier 5. 2 surrounded Godfrey. Out of the lips of the 4 of them came out jeers. Seeing this, Mountain took a heavy step forward, his armor gaining a crimson shade, crackling with black lightning as his cloak became as dark as night. Godfrey placed his palm on his face as soft laughter left his lips. I almost thought I was dead, thank you for this skill. His blue eyes flared with a bright gleam, reflecting the purple moon. Godfrey placed his palm on his face as soft laughter left his lips. I almost thought I was dead, thank you for this skill. His blue eyes flared with a bright gleam, reflecting the purple moon. Goblin General frowned, furious that these red meats dared laugh in his presence. Yet he faltered when the huge knight, far more muscular than him, also split into 4, each of them donning massive crimson armor with a dark sun. Their obsidian longswords reflected the purple glow of the moon. The dark sun and its rays on the fan-shaped crest of Mountain, and his 3 copies' great helmets looked like a bleeding sun, an ominous sight none expected from what was once a regal-looking knight. With a war cry, the goblin general swung his club, but Mountain blocked with his shield, his ironclad boot digging into the rocky ground. Web-like cracks spread outward, a shockwave of dust sweeping across the hall. Grunting, Mountain retaliated with a powerful thrust, the sword cutting into the goblin general's left ear as he tilted his head. Seeing an opening, Mountain slammed his shield into the goblin general, forcing him backward, then followed with a heavy swing. The general blocked and countered with a massive strike that tore through the wall beside them. Mountain leaned back to avoid the blow, then surged forward, slamming his armored head into the hobgoblin's skull. Its advantage had always been overwhelming opponents by multiplying itself, a cowardly method, renowned among goblins, but this time that method was useless. One of its copies was slammed against the wall by one of Mountain's doubles, its chest crushed beneath an ironclad boot. J.K. Kaskaja, the goblin general cried, seeking aid as he tried to retreat, but Mountain unleashed a mana slash, severing his club-wielding arm. The general's eyes widened as he clutched the bleeding wound, only to see that his copies were dead and 3 more Crimson Steel Knights, tanks in human form, were advancing with heavy metallic clinks. Dozens of hobgoblins descended through rope ladders, guttural battle roars filling the air. The goblin general tried to flee, but found 3 hulking mountains closing in. All 3 unleashed mana slashes, cutting off his remaining limbs before severing the chains binding the dungeon core. By then, the hobgoblins had landed, swarming toward Godfrey and his summons from all directions. Godfrey quickly retreated, joining Mountain and forming a round barricade with him and the 3 copies. Godfrey gripped his longsword and great oval shield tight, his entire body covered in heavy armor. Even in the blackout state, his nerves were taut, sweat trickling inside his helm as he faced a literal small army. Each goblin was only 6'2", 1 meters tall, nothing dangerous alone, but their numbers made them a high-tier threat. At that moment, something opened within him. Mana surged through his pathways, nourishing his muscles, strengthening his bones, and heightening his senses. It was as if a dam had burst inside him, as if the power within could tear through his flesh. Then, like one waking from sleep, Godfrey opened his eyes and found himself at the end of Mountain's chamber, staring at a massive, ornate double door of wood and brass. At the intersection where both sides of the door met was the insignia of a great warbow. It's open, the door's open. The doors swung inward, revealing another hall. To the left was a plain stone door, but as he turned to the right, his eyes narrowed on the armored figure seated upon a polished wooden throne. He was huge, nearly 7 feet tall, clad in golden armor. His flat-topped great helm had no slits or holes for eyes. A crown with 6 sharp, dagger-like protrusions jutted skyward, and the symbol of the sun was etched on both sides of the helm where cheeks should have been. A massive warbow, larger than him, rested on 2 iron hooks above the throne. "What a knight!" Godfrey gasped inwardly. The aura of the knight captain pressed heavily upon him as the knight rose to his feet, armor clinking softly. He lifted the colossal warbow, which seemed to weigh more than 100 pounds, and descended with heavy steps. His shadow loomed over Godfrey, but instead of attacking, the knight captain went down on one knee, lowering his head in a bow. His fingers tightened around the bow's grip, as if anticipating the command Godfrey would give. "Summon Bow Knight Captain of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 5. Potential 7. Description: a 7-foot-tall bow knight, apex of the archery unit. Through alchemic alterations, he has been reborn without eyes, yet gifted with true sight, the ability to perceive anything within a 300-meter radius, and to sense mana fluctuations far beyond. He can also see hyperdetailed up to a kilometer in a straight line, possesses Herculean strength and invisibility. In blackout state, the bow knight breaks the limits of his base strength, and can summon up to 100 golden bowmasters to fight alongside him. With a bow of that size, you might as well be a human ballista. Oh, I'll call you Ballista then." His eyes opened in the real world, and he found himself standing in darkness. Mountains stood before him, scratches marring his armor from helm to boots, cloak in tatters and stained with goblin blood. With the dungeon core destroyed, the dungeon had collapsed, ejecting them, but the battle had been brutal, judging from Mountain's state. Rising to his feet, Godfrey opened a portal, a golden diagram flaring to life, chasing away the darkness and revealing the abandoned subway station. The light scattered nocturnal creatures, and another huge knight emerged, slightly shorter than Mountain but radiating an imposing aura. His crown marked him as a noble born of war. Ballista turned his head toward Mountain, and the two exchanged a soft nod. Godfrey, a mere 183 cm compared to the 213 cm Ballista, and the towering 228 cm Mountain, looked like a child under the protection of giants. The sight of these knights would certainly draw attention. Their exquisite designs were far too refined to be mistaken for simple humanoid golem summons. Thanks to symbiosis, the skill that allowed summoners to gain 50% of their summon's strength, Godfrey realized he had grown much stronger after unlocking Ballista. Running through his veins was the power of a Tier 5 elite. That was only a side gain. Once Ballista entered blackout state, he would become a Tier 6 high tier, while Mountain, having absorbed the dungeon core, would rise to Tier 5.1. Gains from green dungeons were growing harder, which was why Godfrey's focus remained on entering the top 3. The school was offering high-level dungeon cores for the top 3 students. Even third place came with a core strong enough to boost a Tier 4 elite summon by 0.5. "It's here," voices snapped Godfrey from his thoughts. 2 individuals descended the staircase, bright phone torches raised toward him, Mountain and Ballista. Ballista placed one end of his bow on the ground and conjured an arrow. Its shaft was as thick as a thumb, its head like a ballista bolt. He drew the bowstring. The thought of the destruction such a weapon could unleash sent fear down Godfrey's spine, especially after reading Ballista's description. He quickly retrieved both Ballista and Mountain, but in the scramble, one of the intruders dropped his torch, the phone clattering to the ground with a sharp gasp. The surge of mana as the dungeon closed must have drawn them. Surprisingly, he could feel the mana within them, a sign that they were summoners, and judging by the density of their mana, they both had elite tier summons. He covered his face with his hood and walked past them. One was a man, the other a woman, and they both had wary expressions. Just what kind of summon did they just see? It looked like the mindless humanoid summon, but they could clearly feel the mana pulsing out of those knights and the weight of their gaze. They had will, they were powerful. These 2 descriptions didn't fit the bill of a humanoid summon. "What is that?" the woman asked the man, her eyes filled with questions. "The quarterfinals have begun," Evangeline, the headmaster's PA, said while looking down at the arena through the wall-to-ceiling window behind the headmaster's desk. The headmaster, Sebastian, stood beside her with one hand folded behind him, smiling softly. Strangely, the boy is also among them. Evangeline looked at him. "Is he actually a king tier?" "A king tier with an unclassified growth potential doesn't exist. As much as I hate to admit it, the gauge you used must have malfunctioned," Sebastian said firmly, though doubts flickered in Evangeline's eyes. The gauge was made with resources from Blue Dungeons, and for the past 6 decades, not once has there been a mistake. While she pondered, 2 students ascended the battle platform under the watch of hundreds of spectators, some whispering, some yelling one of the contestants' names, while others watched in silence. Dale stood with his arms crossed on the platform, facing Orwen, who without delay called for his summon. A white diagram flared beside him, and a huge scorpion emerged, its exoskeleton forged entirely of mana-reinforced diamond. It glittered enticingly under the sun, a sight many would lunge at, for such a summon was worth hundreds of millions. But this beast was deadly. And for that reason, dreams could only remain dreams. Diamond Scorpion, Elite Tier 5.4, the referee announced. Every summon had what could be considered their stats: offense, defense, recovery, speed, and trick. Whatever stat they leaned more toward defined their traits. The trick factor had to do with unnatural abilities such as elements and other unique skills. While the Diamond Scorpion's trick factor wasn't worth noting, its defense, offense, and speed were terrifying, especially its venomous offense. This made the fight worth watching, but Dale's armored Emperor Bull shot a bolt of lightning at the Scorpion, and it collapsed instantly. "I've lost," Orwen said, raising his hand and retrieving his summon. Silence swept across the arena. Everyone could see the bull hadn't even used enough mana in that bolt to justify a Diamond Scorpion collapsing. From a classroom window above, John chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Around him sat a group of boys and girls, members of the Nexus Club known as the Numbered. Each was ranked according to strength, and only the boldest dared sit in John's presence. "It's finally time for the humanoid summoner," said a 17-year-old boy with light brown hair and sharp features. His looks alone had earned him a place among the top 10 most attractive boys in Manhattan High. A light smile played on his lips as he focused on the arena. "I never thought you'd be interested in a one-sided beatdown, Percival," John said, his eyes locking onto Percival, who gave him a casual glance. "I just find it strange that our world hates summoners whose summons look like us." "What?" a red-haired girl snapped, leaning against the wall beside John's desk. "We don't hate them, they're just pathetic. They've made the lives of summoners miserable. Do you know what it's like to summon a clumsy undead skeleton whose only merit is not dying even when its head gets slapped off? How dare you go against John, just because your number 3 doesn't give you the right?" Lilith scowled inwardly, her cold eyes fixed on Percival. Percival only shrugged. His summon is different. Meanwhile, Godfrey approached the platform as Dale descended. "You're up, do well, night boy," Dale chuckled. "Yeah, sure, bull man." Dale's teeth clenched, his body snapping back in fury, but Godfrey was already ascending the staircase. Cecil stood on the other side, arms folded lazily like she already knew the outcome. According to her predictions, even if Godfrey's summon reached Tier 5, it was still an elite tier, and nothing compared to her Tier 5.8 high-tier summon, which had mastered human martial arts, multiplying its lethality. Against massive summons, there might have been a problem, but against a humanoid summon, hers was the predator. "Come out," Cecil said lightly. A glowing diagram flared to life beside her, and a towering, ape-like monster emerged, covered in thick white fur suited for frozen landscapes. Its 8-foot frame dwarfed Cecil. Its fur looked coarse and rugged, but underneath was a mountain of raw muscle. Its arms were long and powerful, fists the size of boulders built for smashing foes. While fur covered parts of its forearms and hands, its chest and torso were bare, revealing purplish-black, steel-like skin. Its legs were massive, twice the size of renowned bodybuilders, built for explosive kicks, leaps, and sprints. 2 wolf-like ears jutted from its head, and its wide, snarling mouth revealed rows of sharp fangs. Burning eyes glowed with malice and brutal intelligence, while a mane of longer fur ran down its head and back, tousling like a wild mane in the wind. "Titan Yaegui, High Tier 5.8, the referee announced, instinctively glancing at Godfrey, and silently praying the blonde boy wasn't foolish enough to fight such a dreadful summon. "Keck, you're toast," someone shouted from the crowd. Godfrey turned and saw it was a curly-haired freshman with a bag of chips. Shouts like a true fanboy, Godfrey thought with a scowl. Truthfully, he was toast, if not for the subway dungeon. "What are you waiting for?" Baines excited, Cecil said, stroking her summon's thick leg. "He doesn't get excited often, but I guess he likes it when the crowd is watching." She raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're scared. If you are, don't be. I'm not a brute like Siegfried." "I haven't spoken to her before, but she's a talker," Godfrey thought as a golden diagram flared behind him, brighter than the ones before. Cecil quickly noticed the symbol at the top of the diagram. Where once there had been a shield and a sword, now there was a giant warbow. What's this? Her pupils shrank. Present. Next. The metallic sounds reassured Cecil, and she breathed out in relief, only for Ballista to walk out, the sun reflecting off his majestic, golden-armored body. His mighty warbow made his presence even more eye-catching, as everyone quickly noticed this knight wasn't mountain. Shocked whispers and gasps spread throughout the arena, while in the headmaster's office, Evangeline looked at Sebastian, her hands trembling softly. It's a 5 elite tier summon with a potential of 7. She didn't yell, in fact, her voice was soft, almost breathless, yet the impact it made was as powerful as a cry. The news struck the headmaster heavily, prompting creases to grace his temples. What is this? Sebastian asked himself with a frown. He wanted to brush this off as Godfrey awakening another summon, which was rare, but not uncommon. But this summon looked similar to the first. It felt like this summon and the former were part of a set. That thought shook his core, because of a question that haunted him at the end of this assumption. Were there more? If there were, and their tiers and potential were higher, then Godfrey was indeed a king tier, and a frightening one, because having more than one summon made him more of a threat than a summoner with a single or dual summons. Meanwhile, at the arena, Cecil tried to pacify herself. It can't be that it has the same skill like the fur. Her worst fear became reality as Ballista entered blackout state, and his tier rose from 5 to 6. The referee's mouth shut. The crowd erupted into an uproar, absolutely stunned at the absurdness of Godfrey's summon. One summon having such a skill was frightening, but 2. That was beyond frightening. This is bad, Orwin said with a solemn expression, turning to Dale, who was frozen in shock just like Cecil. It might be a 6 high tier, but the Titan Jaeger isn't going to be defeated by a knight, wielding such an absurd bow without an eyehole on his helmet. Snow spat nonchalantly. That's true, that bow looks impractical, Dale nodded. A freshman that heard them scowled at Godfrey. What's he going to do with that stupid-looking bow? Place it on the ground and shoot, he mocked with a loud voice. At Cecil's wordless command, the Titan Jaeger charged at Ballista, fist clenched and prepared to punch his skull inward. With thick legs capable of kicking a huge tree off the ground, leaving behind a disorientated stump, the Jaeger bounded across the platform. Its muscles rippled beneath its purplish-black, steel-like skin, and its snarling jaws stretched wide, baring fangs meant to rend through knights and beasts alike. Ballista, however, simply slammed one end of his bow on the stone, summoned an arrow whose arrowhead reflected the sunlight, and knocked it. The sound of the tendons used to make the bowstring stretching rippled through the air as Ballista drew his arm back until it could be vividly seen he drew this bow with his entire body. At this point, the Jaeger was near. Ballista released the arrow, and time seemed to pause for a moment. The air blew apart, and the huge Titan Jaeger was launched backward like it had slammed headfirst into an 18-wheeler truck. Hurtled backward by the impact, the beast crashed a few meters away, an arrow lodged right into its shoulder. Half of the shaft poking out the other side. Growling in rage, the Jaeger pulled out the arrow with an earth-shaking raw blood spilling down its massive frame, and leaped high, mana gathering in its clenched fist. Its shadow loomed like a falling mountain, eyes burning with malice. Ballista turned invisible, and the Jaeger slammed where he once stood, spreading web-like cracks from the fist dents on the stone platform. It sensed Godfrey standing not too far away and grinned, saliva dripping from its fangs. Godfrey innocently raised an eyebrow. A mini shockwave erupted as the Titan Jaeger leaped several meters into the air, only for Ballista to appear beside Godfrey as an arrow left his bow. Just as it left, another arrow was shot, and another, right after another. By the time the 5th arrow pierced through the Titan Jaeger's abdomen, it landed before Godfrey and his summon, staggering and bleeding with arrows rivaling ballistic bolts poking out of its back. Ballista swung his bow, slamming the Titan's chin with so much force, it staggered backward and collapsed, sprawled on the ground, staring at the sky like a dead beast before Cecil could even react. Her summon didn't even have the chance to showcase its ancient art mastery. Its towering bulk, its rugged mane, its mountain of raw muscle, all of it fell without purpose. Her supposed advantage suddenly became a glaring weakness that Ballista mercilessly exploited. She watched with disbelief as the medics rushed in and took her summon away, but that disbelief turned to shame as she watched Isolde clap. She was the only one clapping in the arena, but it echoed, striking everyone who didn't expect this outcome right at their hearts. Snow's expression was distorted when he saw the freshman who spoke boldly because of his statement. The hot wash of shame over his face was a feeling Snow loathed. The referee, watching as the Titan's blood was quickly cleaned off the platform, felt horrified at that knight whose bow was aimed at Cecil. Technically, Cecil had to be beaten, quit verbally, or walk out of the platform for the match to be declared over, but no one in their right mind would want to fight a summon like Ballista without a summon of their own. Cecil stared at Godfrey, her true mood hidden behind a mask of indifference. "Godfrey Daniels, I'll make sure your secret will one day be on the lips of every student in this school. Then you won't be able to hide anymore." Saying this inwardly, she left the platform, glancing at Snow, who ascended after her from the corner of her eyes. On the other side, Godfrey fist-bumped Isolde and left, while she stood at the top of the platform. The bloody shock of Godfrey's victory was momentarily suppressed by the charming looks of the two contestants. Isolde's beauty was only surpassed by upperclassmen who had more developed curves, but she was indeed a sight to behold. However, so was Snow. Right from his freshman days, he had been among the top 10 attractive boys in Manhattan, and he still kept growing even more handsome due to his summon's influence. Isolde summoned a towering wyvern over 12 feet tall, its alabaster scales glistening under the sunlight as its wings unfurled wide with a sharp, snapping gust. Snow summoned a butterfly, much smaller in terms of body, but with a wingspan broader than the wyvern's, shimmering with dazzling iridescence like fractured light through stained glass. "White Wyvern High Tier 7, the referee announced and drew a deep breath. "Glimmer Wing Butterfly High Tier 6.5. "Stop acting mysterious and show me your second summon," Snow bellowed as his summon took to the skis along with Isolde's wyvern. Beating its wings, the Glimmer Wing Butterfly released thousands of red and green glimmers. The infamous red glimmer was known to petrify any part of the body it touched, but the more deadly one was the green glimmer, which could put its target in a dangerous illusion, one many could never escape from unless the butterfly itself willed it. Its dazzling wings shimmered with spectral light, casting a hypnotic glow that seemed to blur the boundary between reality and dream. The white wyvern flapped its vast, bat-like wings, soaring higher. With a swift U-turn, it flew out of the platform's airspace, gliding around the arena with elegant grace that matched the ethereal sophistication of the butterfly. Its alabaster scales caught the sun, glittering like shards of ice. Now out of range of the glimmers, the wyvern opened its fanged jaws and unleashed a frosty beam, but the glimmer wing responded instantly, weaving its glimmers into a radiant shield, an adaptive skill called Aegis Shield. "That wyvern just used dragon's breath," a student gasped. Wyverns were known for their powerful bodies, but they lacked innate elemental abilities. That was the exclusive trait of true dragons. Seeing a wyvern wield an elemental ability as an adaptive skill meant it was on the brink of evolution. Becoming a dragon meant becoming a summon with king or queen tier potential. Snow's summon has learned item manipulation. He even made an Aegis shield out of glimmer, and it's durable enough to block an ice breath. Lilith complimented with a surprised glint in her eyes. "No wonder you have your eyes on him as your successor." She looked at John. The wyvern was naturally a master of flight, while the glimmer-wing butterfly relied heavily on its glimmers. Again and again, the wyvern launched freezing beams, each blast tearing through the air with a howl of winter, but the butterfly countered with an Aegis shield every single time. Explosions roared in the sky, keeping everyone on their toes as frost and shimmering light clashed above the arena. Snow's eyes gleamed, and his summon suddenly beat its wings with fierce intensity. Instead of moving, it released a massive torrent of glimmers that spiraled into a horizontal hurricane, engulfing the wyvern in a storm of iridescent light. The wyvern flew out seemingly unharmed, but then, to the horror of the audience, they saw it soaring higher into the sky only to dive straight downward with reckless speed. It would crash headfirst into the platform, destroying itself in the process. Worse, as it fell, its alabaster body slowly turned grey and brittle. The red glimmers were petrifying it mid-flight. "Isn't Isolde going to do anything?" Heated voices erupted in the arena, but at the last moment, a glowing diagram appeared beneath the wyvern. The fully petrified beast vanished into it, recalled by its master. Snow's lips curled upward. "My summon has a natural advantage over yours. Its trick factor can't be countered by the brute force of a mere wyvern. Come on, Isolde Pendragon, the greatest genius of our time, show me your second summon." He waved his hand, and 6 javelins made of crimson glimmers materialized in the air. This was the same skill his summon used, an adaptive ability called item manipulation, the art of shaping physical objects from elemental or abstract concepts, such as fire swords born of flame or crystal spears forged from light. Snow might win this fight, some freshmen began whispering, awed by his mastery of this adaptive skill. "I'll show everyone that I'm better than you," Snow roared inwardly, charging forward. I will be the king that subdued you and put you in line. His summon floated above, releasing 2 more hurricanes of glimmer, while Snow doubled the number of spears circling him. Isolde lifted her right hand. A violet beam, twice the size of a grown man, blossomed above her palm. Its terrifying glow distorted the faces of everyone in the arena into masks of horror, their pupils trembling as though death itself had arrived. Then, to their shock, the massive beam condensed, shrinking until it was no larger than a ping-pong ball. Yet the gravity around it warped violently, pulling in dust and stone fragments as though it were the sun and the debris, its orbiting planets. All this happened in a nanosecond. She flicked it. In that instant, violet light burst from within Snow, engulfing him in a searing sphere that collapsed smaller and smaller until it vanished into nothingness. Snow found himself standing beside the referee outside the platform, all connections to his summon and powers cut off, forcing the glimmer-winged butterfly to return to his soul space. His greatest shock came when he saw the aftermath. The tiny violet sphere struck the place he had once stood. Half the platform disappeared. The ground was hollowed out into a 100-meter-deep crater, blackened earth streaked with violent violet energy at its core. Snow could even hear the thunderous heartbeat of the horrified referee beside him. His own fists clenched in rage, and his bloodshot eyes locked on Isolde, who left the platform with serene grace, not even sparing him a glance. Clap, clap. Snow's burning gaze shifted to Godfrey, the only one standing and clapping, a proud smile on his lips. Snow clenched his jaw, his composed facade shattered, and stormed off the arena. She's a beautiful monster, John said with an exhilarated smile, eyes gleaming with infatuation. But his gaze darkened when he noticed the charming smile Isolde gave Godfrey as she returned to her seat, accepting a bottle of water from him. Seeing this, Lilith chuckled softly. She's rather close with that humanoid summoner. Yuan shot her a cold glance that screamed, you just had to say that to his face. Lilith pouted. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, Sebastian turned to Evangeline. The rules have changed. Godfrey and Dale will compete in the semifinals. Whoever wins will face Isolde for first place. The loser will be given second place. Evangeline nodded, her eyes fixed on Godfrey and Isolde. If Godfrey really is a king tier, doesn't that mean the Shadow King of Manhattan is sitting right beside its undisputed queen? Her comment made Sebastian raise an eyebrow. He returned to his seat, entwined his fingers, and leaned forward. We are not certain Godfrey is a king tier, and if he really is, it puts our school in a tough spot. Evangeline frowned. Why? He'll be one of the greatest talents the world has ever seen. Yes, but he's a humanoid summoner. You know what that means. Sebastian's reply made Evangeline's eyes widen. As the sun began to set and most students were already in their dorms, Cecil, dressed in casual clothing, walked into the boys' dormitory. The lobby was L-shaped with 3 doors, 2 for the students' rooms and 1, closer to the exit, for the bathroom and toilet. Her eyes narrowed the moment she entered. Standing before her, fresh from the bathroom, was a tall, handsome boy who froze mid-step. He wore only a tank top and boxers, his frame lean but well-built. His calm brown eyes locked onto her, holding her in place with a gaze that felt unshakably steady. You are, he asked, one brow raised in mild curiosity. Cecil, sophomore year, I'm here to see Snow, she answered with her usual calculative glint still flickering in her eyes, yet beyond it lay something rare for her, humility. After all, she was standing before Percival, known as number 3. Below the 4th-year seniors, only 2 students in the 3rd year, and a handful more in the 4th, were stronger than him. Not more than 10 in the entire school could boast to be stronger than him. Oh! The click of a door turned both their heads. Snow, the white-haired sophomore with the looks of a celebrity, emerged, his sharp features twisted into a frown the moment he saw Cecil. What are you doing here? Girls aren't permitted in the boys' dormitories, he lashed out, his voice quick and sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. Percival's lips curled faintly as he shrugged. Sliding his hand into his pocket, he moved toward his room, uninterested, until Cecil's next words froze him in his tracks. I have information about Godfrey. The humanoid summoner, Percival's thoughts darkened, his eyes narrowing slightly. Snow's frown deepened. You came here to talk to me about that fool. I don't care what he does or what secrets he's hiding. Leave. I overheard Miss Evangeline speaking with a staff member, Cecil said firmly. They mentioned that Godfrey is actually a king-tier summoner, though she didn't sound entirely sure. I think the school and Godfrey himself are hiding it. A heavy silence fell across the lobby. Snow's eyes widened in shock, while disbelief washed over Percival's face. Both of them, two of Manhattan High's top boys, found themselves unable to immediately think, let alone speak. If Miss Evangeline, the headmaster's own secretary, was involved, then there had to be some credibility. And since when has anyone been uncertain about a summoner's tear? That had never happened in recorded history. Cecil clenched her fist, a dangerous gleam flashing through her eyes. And I intend to expose it. No one will believe me at first. Many will want confirmation, since they'll find it absurd that a humanoid summoner could be King Tyr. But if he isn't, his life will turn miserable. And if he truly is King Tyr, the authorities will come for him. Percival's eyes narrowed further at that thought. Cain and his fanatics had already proven how dangerous humanoid summons could be. A King Tyr humanoid summoner meant a summon with intelligence, history, and its own civilization, and equal to its master. Cain's infamous Blood March had shown the world the risk of such bonds, where the summoner often developed a god complex from being worshipped by their own summon. That complex alone made them a threat to modern civilization. Adam, the first summoner, had refused to fall under the control of the authorities, and his summon had been part human based on its intelligence level. If there was one thing Percival knew, it was that the authorities craved absolute control. A powerful summoner outside their grip could mean chaos. You just want to put him in a tough spot, Percival thought grimly. No matter what happens, once this news is revealed, it's over for Godfrey. He sighed. She was setting Godfrey up against people no student could hope to resist. Why tell me this, why not Dale? Snow asked, his voice low. Cecil scoffed. I've had enough of that dull-headed brute. Besides, I need stronger allies in case Godfrey truly is King Tyr. You're one, she turned her eyes to Percival, and you're another. Not even a King Tyr can withstand the upper echelon of Manhattan. And what's your reason for doing this? Percival pressed. Cecil raised an eyebrow, but before she could answer, Snow chuckled coldly. Isn't it obvious? I don't like him, both of them said in unison. At another dormitory building, Godfrey sat at his desk, facing his laptop. The screen glowed softly, illuminating his calm face as he held a video call with Isolde. I thought you wouldn't answer my call, she teased, her tone light, golden-orange eyes gleaming with mischief. I guessed you'd be trembling after my display of might, but you're braver than I thought. Godfrey chuckled. I still plan on beating you and taking the spot for valedictorian. Oh, what a courageous, pretty face, she cooed, flashing a sweet smile that caught Godfrey off guard. But before he could reply, a knock at his door shattered the moment. I'll be back, Godfrey said quickly, leaving his chair. Speaking with Isolde was something he disliked being interrupted in, but the knock had to be one of the cleaners asking if he was ready for his room to be tidied. The moment he opened the door, his words died in his throat. A massive diamond scorpion loomed in the lobby, its glittering exoskeleton barely fitting in the narrow space. The lights from the ceiling danced along its crystalline body, a sight as mesmerizing as it was deadly. Faster than thought, its venomous stinger lunged forward, piercing Godfrey's chest. His breath caught, pain flared, then quickly dulled. His body staggered backward, the world blurring, his knees buckling as he slammed onto the hard floor. His eyes remained wide open, but he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even think. His effort to unleash his summon died midway. The searing agony of the stinger's wound dimmed unnaturally fast, as though his senses themselves were being stripped away one by one. Siegfried, Maldred, and Orwin stepped inside, the latter retrieving his summon. A trembling freshman, Godfrey's dorm mate, dangled helplessly in Siegfried's grasp. I can't believe this trash got lucky enough to have 2 summons and now dares to threaten Dale and Snow, Siegfried sneered. He squatted, grabbed a fistful of Godfrey's hair, and yanked his head up to stare into his vacant eyes. He slapped his face once, then twice, but Godfrey didn't react. His gaze was glassy, fixed on the ceiling above. He's lost all his senses, Maldred muttered, one hand sliding into his pocket. He can't see, feel, hear, smell, taste, or even perceive anything. Your venom really is a knocker, Orwin. Before Orwin could reply, a sound came from the laptop. Godfrey, are you all right? What was that sound? Who are you talking to? Orwin's eyes widened. Is that Isolde? He whispered. I can't believe this twerp even gets to make calls with her. What a lucky bastard, Siegfried chuckled maliciously. Don't worry, we'll put him somewhere safe. Orwin jabbed the freshman, forcing him to produce sticky webs that quickly sealed Godfrey in a cocoon-like binding. They tossed the terrified boy aside, and dragged Godfrey's bound body out of the room. Godfrey, Isolde's yell came from the laptop, her voice sharp with alarm since the silence began to make her feel uncomfortable, but no answer came. "What is that? It looks like a student." A freshman gasped as she watched Siegfried drag what appeared to be a mummified human, but instead of white cloth, the body was wrapped in thick webs. Orwen and Maldred walked beside him, their shadows stretching long under the dim light. It was already late, past 7, and the sun had gone down. The street lights, however, lit up the footpath with soothing, bright orange light. Yet the sight of a student being abducted right before her eyes unsettled her deeply. She could almost picture herself in the place of that unfortunate victim. "Let's go, what they do doesn't concern us. It's the fault of whoever is in that web sack for provoking people like that," her friend whispered harshly, tugging at her arm, trying to pull her toward the female dormitory before Siegfried spotted them staring. "Are we taking him to the usual spot?" Maldred asked, his tone casual though the image of an unfinished building at the far, isolated edge of the campus burned in his mind. "Of course," Siegfried replied with a wide grin. "We should hurry," Orwen muttered, yawning, only for his eyes to suddenly freeze wide open. At the other end of the footpath, a tall figure stepped into view, carrying a plain white bag. Under the soft orange light, his features became clear. It was number 3, Percival. All 3 of them stopped cold, their eyes tracking Percival as he walked calmly and turned right at a distance. The waist-high flowers planted neatly along the sides of the footpath blocked his view of Godfrey, wrapped up in the web sack. "Drop him!" Percival's cold tone cut through the air like a blade, and the atmosphere instantly grew heavy. The weight of his gaze pressed down on them, his mana flooding the path with suffocating pressure. None of them could move. "Dale sent us," Siegfried bellowed, veins bulging at his neck as if trying to withstand the crushing presence. Percival scoffed, his lips curling faintly. "Am I supposed to be afraid of a sophomore? Your actions can get you suspended or even expelled." His eyes gleamed sharply. "Scram." Siegfried exchanged a look with Maldred and Orwen. None of them dared to stay. With clenched jaws and fists, they slowly backed away before turning and retreating into the night. Percival approached the sack, his gaze stern as his thoughts burned. "A King Tyr, what a joke. Cecil's plan will only end up making your life miserable. You're no King Tyr. A real King Tyr wouldn't lose a fig." He tore through the thick webbing, only for his words to die in his throat. His eyes widened as he saw the gaping puncture wound in Godfrey's chest, left by the diamond scorpion's stinger. "And this?" The door to the nurse's office swung open, slamming against the wall as Isolde stormed inside. Her sudden entrance startled those present, Teacher Edwin, the school nurse Julia, and Percival himself. "Isolde, you're not supposed to be here. It's late. Come back tomorrow." Edwin barked, but she ignored him completely. Her steps carried her straight past him. She pushed the curtain aside with force, revealing Godfrey lying on the sickbed. Her eyes widened at the sight of the bandage wrapped tightly around his chest. Normally, the school nurse could heal any injury in minutes, an hour at most. Even broken bones would be mended in record time. But here she could feel it, the destabilized mana at his chest. The wound was still there. "Why isn't he healed?" she demanded sharply, turning to Julia. The nurse kept her voice steady, though her hands tightened slightly around her clipboard. He was afflicted with the venom of a peak elite tier summon, a venom strong enough to knock out summoners between tiers 6 and 6.5. It will take time for my summon's healing abilities to neutralize the poison and mend the wound. Isolde's expression hardened, clearly unsatisfied. Edwin quickly stepped in, his tone firm but calm. "The venom isn't life-threatening. It has shut down all his senses, but it won't kill him no matter the dosage. All it requires is time. Godfrey will recover, however." He sighed heavily, lowering his gaze. He may not be able to participate in the semifinals against Dale tomorrow. Isolde's face distorted, her fury visible in every line of her expression. Mana burst from her body in waves, more raw power than Julia, a woman in her early 30s with a 5 summon, had ever held in reserve. The air trembled. "This was Dale's doing," she hissed. "Isolde, stop." Edwin tried to calm her, but Percival interjected, rubbing his temples with a tired expression. Hard lines cut across his forehead as he spoke. "It was Siegfried, Orwen, and Maldred. They planned to make sure Godfrey couldn't participate. Siegfried admitted it to me himself, and he said Dale sent him." Isolde stormed toward the door, but Edwin grabbed her wrist. His tone was sharp, almost pleading. "Your mother gave strict instructions that you leave matters like this for the school's authorities to handle. Those orders are not to be discarded." Her eyes burned with defiance. She pulled her wrist free and walked off, though Edwin could only hope she wouldn't take matters into her own hands. She was already as powerful as many fourth-year students, and in her current fury, one reckless move could be catastrophic. Godfrey's ocean blue eyes opened slowly, staring blankly at the white ceiling above him. Sunlight streamed in from the tall glass wall beside his sickbed. He sat up suddenly, grimacing as his hand flew to his chest, but to his shock there was nothing. His chest was completely fine. The pain he remembered, the diamond scorpion, the venom, it was all gone. It almost felt like a dream, and yet it had been far too vivid to be one. "You're awake." The nurse stepped through the curtain with a soft smile, though her gentle tone offered him no comfort. I was growing worried. "Has the contest begun?" Godfrey asked immediately, his voice low but urgent. The nurse's eyes flickered briefly, betraying a secret before she answered. "You've been unconscious for 48 hours. Since you couldn't attend, you were awarded 3rd place." Godfrey's expression darkened, his fists tightening on the sheets. "Are they aware it was my classmates who put me here, that it was Dale who sent them?" She nodded softly. "They were severely cautioned and will never try it again." "That's it," his voice exploded, his face twisting in anger. "They'll never try it again. That's what the school wants to feed me after what I went through." His fists clenched tighter, his eyes burning with fury. "Tell them I'm done with Manhattan." The nurse lowered her eyes, though inwardly she thought, that would be for the best. Outwardly, she only nodded before slipping out of the room to make a call to Edwin. "I see, I'll let the headmaster know before I proceed," Edwin muttered after lowering his phone. Across from him, the combat instructor sat frowning, his arms crossed tightly. "What did you expect?" the instructor asked bluntly. "That kid isn't the type to bow his head. He never has and he never will." "We can't suspend Siegfried, Maldred, Orwin and Dale," Edwin replied with a weary sigh. "They are promising students, true talents of the sophomore class. The school won't allow it. It's unfortunate for Godfrey, but that's the hard truth. His stubbornness will only carry him so far." Edwin rose from his chair, but the instructor followed, his voice firm. "I'm coming with you. Godfrey is also a promising student, and Dale did go against the school's rules. He was rewarded for it simply because we can't afford to lose him." "Their field trip is in just a few days," Edwin countered. "It's one of the greatest opportunities for sophomores to grow stronger alongside their summons. Most of them will return far more powerful than before. If these students are punished now, they'll lose a critical chance for development. That's why the headmaster won't even flinch at Godfrey's threat of leaving." "Godfrey said he's what?" Evangeline rose from her seat in shock, her eyes wide with panic when Edwin delivered the news. Both he and the instructor froze at her reaction. Why was she so shaken? Without hesitation, she rushed to the headmaster's office, throwing open the door without knocking, something that left the teachers even more bewildered. "Godfrey wants to transfer," she exclaimed. "What?" Sebastian's glare hardened, his sharp eyes turning toward Edwin and the combat instructor. "Where is he?" Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.